When your mind won't calm down, God speaks into the storm within. And there are nights when your mind refuses to quiet down. You lie awake, lights off, house silent, yet your thoughts grow louder, faster, heavier. Every what if, every memory, every fear, every unfinished responsibility tries to speak at the same time. You replay conversations, imagine worst-case scenarios, feel waves of anxiety rise for reasons you cannot even name. Your body is tired, your heart is tired, but your mind will not rest. If that's you tonight, you are not alone. Many people fall asleep easily, but wake up exhausted because their mind never stopped fighting battles in the dark. The outside world is quiet, but inside a storm is raging. One that drains your peace and steals your ability to breathe deeply. And you've wondered more than once, why can't my mind just calm down, or why does everything feel heavier at night? Stay with me, because there is a reason your thoughts intensify when the world gets quiet. When noise disappears, inner battles surface. When distractions fall away, the mind begins revealing everything you haven't had the time or space to process. Night becomes the place where fears speak the loudest. Not because God is absent, but because your soul is trying to carry more than it was designed to hold alone. But here is the part that brings hope. Your mind may be loud, but God is not silent in the storm. Even when your thoughts race, even when your chest tightens, even when sleep won't come, God is present. He is not intimidated by the noise within you. He is not disappointed by your weakness. He meets you in the chaos of your thoughts with a calm your anxiety cannot produce on its own. The storm in your mind doesn't scare him. The spiraling thoughts don't overwhelm him. The pressure you feel doesn't push him away. God steps into inner storms with a peace that doesn't depend on your ability to control your mind. He speaks gently, firmly, steadily, not to condemn you, but to anchor you. And this is where understanding begins. Before God calms the storm around you, he speaks into the storm within you. Because the loudest battles are not external. They are internal. Your thoughts, your fears, your assumptions, your memories, your unprocessed pain. These are the storms Jesus speaks to first. The greatest breakthroughs often begin in the places no one else sees. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." But notice something. God doesn't say, "Be still because your mind is quiet." He doesn't say, "Be still once the situation improves." He invites you to stillness in the middle of the noise, because his presence is stronger than your thoughts. Be still is not a command to suppress your mind. It's an invitation to shift your focus from what is spiraling inside you to the one who stands steady above the storm. Many people misunderstand mental unrest. They assume something is wrong with them. But often the mind spirals not because you're failing, but because you're carrying unresolved thoughts alone. The mind whispers fears, but God speaks truth. The mind rushes ahead, but God anchors the present moment. The mind creates storms, but God creates stillness in the middle of them. You are not weak because your mind is loud. You are human, and God meets humans exactly where their thoughts unravel. Tonight, let this message remind you. God has a word for the storm within you, and he will speak into the places your fears have occupied for too long. Your thoughts may be intense, but his peace is deeper still. What feels uncontrollable to you is completely known by him, and nothing inside you is too chaotic for his presence to calm. Why the mind spirals at night has a way of revealing what the day manages to hide. When the world becomes quiet, your thoughts become loud. During the day, you move from responsibility to responsibility, task to task, person to person, with barely enough time to breathe, let alone process anything deeply. But when everything slows, and you finally lie down in the silence, your mind begins opening doors it kept closed for hours, sometimes for years. This is one of the main reasons the mind spirals at night. The absence of external noise exposes the presence of internal noise. During daylight, distractions act like bandages, temporary coverings for wounds that still need healing. Activity doesn't resolve pain, it just hides it. But when night comes and the noise fades, your heart tries to address everything you pushed aside. Another reason your mind spirals at night is because the brain is naturally wired to review unresolved stress while you rest. When you lie down, your mind begins sorting through the day, unfinished tasks, conversations, worries, and fears. What felt manageable earlier suddenly feels heavy because your brain is finally giving attention to things you didn't have the capacity to feel earlier. It's not weakness, it's human design. The mind also spirals at night because nighttime amplifies vulnerability. You're tired, your emotional defenses are lower, your perspective narrows. Things that wouldn't bother you as deeply during the day feel overwhelming in the stillness of night. Fatigue makes small concerns seem large and large concerns seem unmanageable. Your mind isn't lying to you. It's simply operating from a place of exhaustion, not clarity. Night also magnifies fear, because imagination is strongest when vision is weakest. Darkness limits what you can see externally, so your mind begins filling the empty space internally. You don't fear what you see, you fear what you can't see. This is why your mind leaps toward worst-case thinking at night. Your thoughts try to prepare you for things that may never happen, simply because the unknown feels louder in darkness. Another reason your mind spirals is because nighttime removes the illusion of control. During the day you feel productive, active, engaged, moving. But at night you are still. And in stillness, you confront the reality that so much of life is outside your control. Finances, relationships, health, future decisions, unfinished dreams. Your mind tries to solve what only God can resolve. And because the brain cannot sit comfortably with uncertainty, it begins replaying the same fears in loops that feel endless. There is also a spiritual reason the mind spirals at night. Nighttime is the moment when the enemy often whispers the loudest, not because he has more power, but because you feel more exposed. He takes advantage of fatigue, isolation, and emotional depletion. He tries to distort perspective, amplify insecurity, and sow thoughts that are completely disconnected from truth. This is not something to fear, but something to recognize. The enemy attacks when you are silent because he cannot silence the God who speaks to you. And yet, night is also when God often speaks most clearly. When distractions dissolve, when responsibilities pause, when the world grows still, your spirit becomes more aware of his presence. But your mind, still holding the weight of the day, struggles to settle enough to hear him. The storm inside you competes with the whisper of God, not because his whisper is weak, but because your thoughts are loud. Finally, the mind spirals at night because unprocessed emotions demand attention. The hurt you didn't talk about, the disappointment you brushed aside, the fear you kept quiet, the stress you pushed through without acknowledging. Night brings them all to the surface, not to punish you, but to invite healing. Your mind is not betraying you. It is revealing the places that need God's peace the most. So if your mind is spiraling tonight, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means you are carrying things that were never meant to be carried alone. It means your heart is overwhelmed. It means your mind is tired. It means your soul needs rest that only God can give. And the good news is this: the God who calms storms can calm the one inside you. The God who speaks peace be still over winds and waves can speak the same words over racing thoughts and restless fears. Your mind may spiral, but his presence does not. 2. The emotional weight of silent anxiety. There is a kind of anxiety that never fully announces itself. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. It doesn't create scenes or outbursts. It lives quietly, beneath your conversations, beneath your responsibilities, beneath the smile you offer to the world. Silent anxiety doesn't shout. It whispers. It drains. And it wears you down in ways even you struggle to explain. Silent anxiety is heavy because it is carried alone. You don't want to burden others. You don't want to seem weak. You don't want to fall apart in front of people who depend on you. So you hold it together during the day, functioning on the surface while unraveling in places no one sees. You keep moving, keep serving, keep showing up. Not because you feel strong, but because stopping feels even scarier. And the result is a heaviness that settles into your chest, your breath, your heartbeat, your thoughts. Silent anxiety feels like trying to walk with weights tied to your spirit. Every task takes more energy than it should. Every decision feels harder than it normally would. You wake up tired. You go to bed tense. Your mind doesn't rest because it is constantly scanning for what could go wrong. Not because you lack faith, but because you have carried too much for too long. One of the heaviest parts of silent anxiety is the sense of isolation it creates. You can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. You can be loved and still feel unseen. You can be capable and still feel on the edge of collapse. This loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of understanding. It's the fear that if others saw the storm inside you, they would think less of you. Or worse, they would not know how to help at all. Silent anxiety also weighs heavily because it attacks your identity. It takes temporary feelings and convinces you they are permanent truths. It tells you that exhaustion means failure, that tension means something is wrong with you, that your weariness is weakness. But none of that is true. Anxiety is not a sign of spiritual emptiness. It is a sign that your heart is overwhelmed, your mind is overloaded, and your soul needs space to breathe again. And then there's the emotional unpredictability of silent anxiety. Some days you feel almost normal. Other days, a small inconvenience can trigger tears or frustration. You don't know why certain moments hit harder than others. You don't understand why simple tasks feel impossible. And this unpredictability makes you question yourself. Why can't I handle this? Why am I like this? But the truth is much softer. You're not like this. You're tired. You're carrying battles that never got the attention they needed. Your heart is signaling that something inside needs care, not criticism. Silent anxiety also creates physical effects: tight shoulders, shallow breathing, tension in your stomach, restlessness in your legs, headaches that appear out of nowhere. These are not signs that something is wrong spiritually. They are signs that your body is speaking when your voice has been quiet for too long. Your emotions have been running marathons without rest, and your body is responding accordingly. But perhaps the heaviest part of silent anxiety is the shame that tries to attach itself. Shame tells you that strong people don't struggle like this. Shame tells you that faith should eliminate all anxiety. Shame tells you that if you truly trusted God, you wouldn't feel this way. Yet Scripture never condemns the anxious heart. Instead, it says, "Cast all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you." Anxiety is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of need. And God meets need with compassion, not condemnation. Silent anxiety becomes even heavier at night. The stillness magnifies what you've managed to suppress. The quiet gives space to thoughts you avoided. And because no one else hears the storm, you begin believing you are the only one fighting it. But you are not. God sees what others don't. He hears the thoughts you never speak aloud. He notices the battles that look invisible to everyone else. And He draws near to the weary, the overwhelmed, the quietly anxious, not to judge them, but to hold them. Silent anxiety is heavy, but it is not bigger than the one who carries you, and you do not have to navigate it alone. God's calm versus your internal noise. There is a difference between the noise inside your mind and the voice of God. One overwhelms, the other steadies. One accelerates your fears, the other anchors your soul. The truth is simple but profound. Your internal noise is loud, but God's calm is deeper. Internal noise comes from many sources: fear, past wounds, unprocessed stress, imagined outcomes, and the weight of responsibilities you never asked for but somehow carry. These voices demand attention. They speak urgently. They push you toward panic, toward assumptions, toward conclusions not rooted in reality but in emotion. The noise inside you often sounds like truth, but it isn't truth. It's pressure disguised as certainty. God's calm, however, is different. It doesn't shout. It doesn't compete with your thoughts. It doesn't rush you or shame you. It simply exists, steady, patient, unwavering, waiting to be noticed beneath the swirl of internal chaos. Your internal noise says, "What if everything falls apart?" God's calm says, "Even if everything shifts, I will hold you." Your internal noise says, "You must fix this right now." God's calm says, "Be still. I'm already working." Your internal noise says, "You're alone in this." God's calm says, "I am with you in ways you cannot yet see." The noise inside is often reactive. God's calm is always reassuring. Internal noise stems from fear. God's calm flows from truth. Noise confuses, calm clarifies. Noise drains, calm restores. This contrast matters because many people assume that a noisy mind means God is distant. But the presence of internal noise does not indicate the absence of divine peace. They often exist at the same time. Your mind can be racing while God is still speaking. Your emotions can be overwhelmed while God is still near. Your thoughts can feel chaotic while His presence remains steady. God does not wait for your thoughts to quiet before He draws near. He comes into the noise. He steps into the storm within you. Just as Jesus spoke "Peace, be still" to the winds and waves, He speaks that same authority over the restless thoughts that toss your mind back and forth. And here is something many overlook. God's calm is not fragile. It isn't something you have to protect. It's not dependent on your emotions behaving. God doesn't withdraw His peace because your thoughts spiral. His peace remains because His presence remains. Internal noise often convinces you that you must solve everything before rest is possible. But God's calm invites you to rest before anything is solved. Because true rest is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of God in the middle of them. Another key difference is this. Internal noise predicts. God's calm reminds. Noise creates stories about the future based on fear. Calm reminds you of what is true right now. That God is present, God is faithful, God is not rushed, God is not confused. Noise says, everything depends on you. Calm says, you were never meant to carry this alone. When God speaks calm into your storm, it doesn't always eliminate the thoughts immediately. Sometimes His calm comes as a quiet strength that allows you to breathe again. Sometimes it comes as a steadying awareness that you are held. Sometimes it comes as a soft interruption, a single truth that cuts through 1,000 anxious possibilities. And sometimes His calm comes as stillness, not the kind you force, not the kind you struggle to maintain, but the kind that arises when you finally realize that God is bigger than the thoughts that overwhelm you. Your internal noise tells you that peace will come once you control your mind. God's calm tells you that peace comes when you trust His presence more than your thoughts. Internal noise rises quickly. God's calm rises steadily. One leaves you exhausted, the other leaves you grounded. Learning to recognize the difference is part of your spiritual maturity. You begin to understand that not every loud thought deserves your attention. Not every fear deserves your agreement. Not every worry deserves your energy. Some thoughts are simply noise, echoes of past pain, patterns of stress, conditions of exhaustion. But God's calm? It is the deeper current beneath all of it. While your mind is noisy on the surface, His peace flows underneath like a river, quiet, constant, and carrying you even when you don't feel it. So when your internal noise rises, you do not have to panic. You do not have to fight your thoughts with more thoughts. You can pause, breathe, and remember. God's calm is stronger than your noise, and the storm inside you is never too loud for His stillness to enter. First, in how truth interrupts mental storms. Every mental storm has one thing in common. It feeds on assumptions, fears, and imagined outcomes that feel true, but are not rooted in truth. Anxiety survives in the absence of clarity. It grows where truth has not yet been applied, and that is why God often meets your mental battles. Not first with a solution, but with truth. Truth that interrupts, truth that exposes, truth that gently dismantles the lies your mind has rehearsed. Truth doesn't argue with your fears. It reveals what fear cannot see. Fear says, "What if everything falls apart?" Truth says, "God holds all things together." Fear says, "You're on your own." Truth says, "He will never leave you nor forsake you." Fear says, "You're losing control." Truth says, "God is sovereign even when you feel overwhelmed." Mental storms are powerful, but they cannot withstand truth that comes from God's presence. Not because truth makes the storm disappear instantly, but because truth changes the way you interpret the storm. When truth enters, the storm loses authority. It might still make noise. It might still try to intimidate, but it cannot dictate your direction anymore. One of the ways truth interrupts mental storms is by separating emotion from reality. Your feelings may be valid, but they are not always accurate. Truth reminds you that feelings are indicators, not dictators. They reveal where you need comfort or clarity, but they do not get to define what is ultimately real. Truth also interrupts anxious spirals by grounding you in something unchanging. Storms are unstable, thoughts are unpredictable, emotions rise and fall. But truth stands still. Truth gives your mind a place to rest when everything else feels in motion. This is why even a single verse, a single phrase, a single reminder of who God is can calm a storm that has been raging for hours. Not because the verse magically erases anxiety, but because it anchors your thinking to a reality deeper than your feelings. Another way truth interrupts mental storms is by exposing lies that have blended into your inner narrative. Lies like, "I always fail," "No one understands me," "I'm too much," "I'm not enough," "If something can go wrong, it will," "I'm a burden," "I should be stronger than this." These thoughts don't sound extreme because you've heard them so often. Sometimes from people, sometimes from circumstances, sometimes from your own inner critic. But truth disrupts these patterns by calling them what they are: lies that do not agree with who God says you are. Truth does not shame you for believing lies. It simply refuses to let them define you. Another way truth interrupts mental storms is by revealing God's nearness. Anxiety magnifies distance. You feel far from peace, far from stability, far from God. But truth reminds you, God is close to the brokenhearted. God is near to the anxious. God is with you in the storm, not waiting for you to calm down before He approaches. When truth reminds you of God's nearness, the storm loses its power to isolate you. You no longer feel like you're drowning alone. You begin to sense the presence of the one who never leaves, and that presence softens the waves crashing inside your mind. Truth also interrupts mental storms by giving you language your anxiety cannot produce. Anxiety speaks in "what if." Truth speaks in "even if." Anxiety speaks in assumptions. Truth speaks in promises. Anxiety speaks of loss. Truth speaks of God's care. When your inner dialogue changes, your inner atmosphere changes. The storm may not vanish instantly, but its direction shifts. Sometimes truth interrupts storms by giving you permission to rest. You do not have to solve every problem tonight. You do not have to fix what is beyond your control. You do not have to untangle every thought before you sleep. Truth tells you that you are safe in God's hands, even when your thoughts feel unsafe in your own. And finally, truth interrupts mental storms by pointing you toward hope, not vague positivity. Real hope grounded in God's character, God's history with you, God's faithfulness in every chapter of your life. Hope doesn't deny storms. Hope declares that storms don't define the story. When truth enters your storm, it doesn't silence every wave. Instead, it places an anchor in the middle of them. And with that anchor, your mind begins to settle, your breathing steadies, and a sense of peace rises. Not because the storm ended, but because truth carried you through it. Signs God is settling your spirit. When God begins to calm the storm within you, the change is often subtle at first. It rarely starts with fireworks or dramatic feelings. Instead, His peace enters quietly, softly enough that you may not notice it immediately, yet steadily enough that you begin to feel something shifting inside you. These shifts are not emotional accidents. They are signs that God is settling your spirit, even while your circumstances remain the same. The first sign is a quieting of your internal urgency. Anxiety pushes you toward immediate answers, quick decisions, and worst-case thinking. But when God begins to settle your spirit, you feel a gentle slowing within you. The rush loses its grip. The pressure eases. You no longer feel that everything must be solved right now. It's not that the problems disappear, it's that you sense deep in your chest that you are not the one holding the world together. God is, and your spirit begins to rest in that reality. A second sign is clarity where there was once confusion. An unsettled mind magnifies every possibility, but a settled spirit begins to distinguish what is real from what is imagined. Instead of spiraling through endless what-ifs, you begin recognizing what is actually in front of you. You start seeing situations with sharper perspective. This clarity is not forced. It rises naturally as God lifts the fog that anxiety built. You think differently, not because the circumstances changed, but because your heart is no longer drowning in noise. A third sign is a renewed ability to breathe deeply. Emotional storms tighten your chest, but God's peace loosens it. You notice moments where your breath comes easier, your shoulders lower without you realizing it. Your body unclenches in places you didn't know were tense. This physical shift is spiritual in nature, your body responding to the settling work God is doing inside your mind. Another sign is the return of gentle hope, not loud hope, not hype, but a quiet sense that maybe things won't always feel this heavy. Hope begins to whisper where anxiety used to shout. You start imagining a future again. You begin feeling possibility instead of dread. You don't know how God will work everything out, but for the first time in a long time, you sense that He will. A fifth sign is the softening of harsh inner dialogue. An unsettled spirit produces a harsh inner critic. Everything feels like your fault. Every mistake feels permanent. Every flaw feels defining. But when God settles your spirit, your inner voice becomes kinder. The criticism loses volume. Compassion rises. You begin treating yourself with the gentleness God already feels toward you. This shift happens when His truth becomes louder than your shame. Another sign is a new ability to pause. When your spirit is unsettled, pausing feels impossible. Your thoughts race ahead. You respond quickly, emotionally, reactively. But as God settles your spirit, you begin pausing before reacting. You breathe. You think. You give yourself space. And in that space, God meets you. This pause is not hesitation. It is spiritual grounding. A seventh sign is a growing awareness of God's presence in ordinary moments. You begin sensing Him in the quiet. You notice Him in small comforts, in unexpected reminders, in scriptures that suddenly come alive. You feel Him near not only when you pray, but when you breathe, when you walk, when you sit in silence. This awareness is evidence that your spirit is becoming attuned to His calming work. Another sign God is settling your spirit is the release of things you once clung to tightly. Anxiety grips. Peace releases. You find yourself letting go of control you never truly had. You stop replaying scenarios you cannot change. You release expectations that burdened you. You loosen your grip on outcomes and start trusting God's timing again. This release feels like exhaling after holding your breath for months. A ninth sign is strength returning in places that once felt depleted. Not a rush of energy, but a quiet resilience. You find yourself handling small stresses with more grace. You recover faster from emotional dips. You recognize thoughts for what they are, rather than accepting them as truth. This is God rebuilding your inner strength. Strength rooted not in self-reliance, but in His steady presence. And one of the clearest signs God is settling your spirit is this. You begin to experience moments of peace that make no sense given your situation. Nothing around you has changed, yet something within you has. You feel held. You feel steadied. You feel safe in a way you cannot fully articulate. This is the peace Scripture describes. A peace that surpasses understanding. Not every sign will appear at once. Not every shift will feel dramatic. But even the smallest signs are proof that God is working in you, touching places your thoughts cannot reach, healing wounds your emotions cannot name, calming storms your strength cannot silence. When God settles your spirit, your circumstances may still be loud, but the storm inside you grows quiet. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because your heart finally remembers who is with you in every wave. When peace begins before your thoughts change, there is always a moment, a quiet, almost hidden moment, when something inside you begins to shift. Not because the storm has stopped, not because the thoughts disappeared, but because you finally recognize God's presence within the storm, and His presence begins to matter more than the noise. This is the turning point, when you realize your mind does not have to be perfectly calm for God to speak peace over you. You don't have to silence your thoughts before He comforts you. You don't have to fix your emotions before He strengthens you. Peace is not the result of control. Peace is the evidence that God stepped into the place your control could never reach. Breakthrough for your mind begins here. Not when every anxious thought is resolved, but when you stop believing the storm has more authority than God's voice. Not when your emotions settle, but when you begin to trust the one who holds you, even when they don't. The turning point is not the absence of the storm. It is the reappearance of hope. It is the recognition that anxiety does not get the final word. God does. How to walk in the peace God is establishing within you. Peace must be received, not forced. So here is how you begin living in the calm God is forming inside you. 1. Pause when the noise rises. A single breath can interrupt a spiraling mind. It creates space for God's voice to enter. 2. Replace fear thoughts with truth thoughts. Not by arguing with anxiety, but by gently reminding your heart of what God has already said. 3. Practice still moments, not perfect ones. Peace grows through small pauses of awareness, not by controlling your thoughts. 4. Release the pressure to solve everything today. Your mind is overwhelmed because it is carrying tomorrow's weight. God gives peace for the present moment, not future fear. 5. Notice God in the quiet. Peace becomes recognizable the more you acknowledge Him in the subtle, ordinary moments of your day. 6. Treat yourself with gentleness. God does not speak harshly to the anxious. Neither should you. Lord, for the one listening right now, the one whose thoughts run faster than their strength, whose nights feel long and heavy, whose mind circles through fears they never speak aloud, I ask for your peace to meet them. Speak into the storm within them. Quiet the lies that have become familiar. Lift the weight from their chest. Remind them that they are held, even when they feel overwhelmed. Let your truth become louder than their fear. Let your presence become nearer than their anxiety. Let your calm settle into the deepest parts of their mind. Where there is tension, bring rest. Where there is confusion, bring clarity. Where there is exhaustion, bring renewed strength. Cover their mind with your peace tonight, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that remains even when thoughts rise, a peace that carries them when they cannot carry themselves. In Jesus' name, amen. May your mind grow quiet tonight. May the God who speaks into storms speak to you in ways you cannot miss. May His peace settle over you like a soft covering, steadying your breath, loosening your burdens, and restoring your hope. You do not walk through your thoughts alone. You do not face your nights alone. God is nearer than every fear, stronger than every anxious thought, and faithful in every moment you cannot understand. If this message brought comfort or clarity, you're invited to subscribe so these moments of peace can continue to meet you where you are. And remember, you are not alone. God is with you, and He will carry you through the storm within.